Welcome to Lifting Your Spirit, a monthly broadcast in which we interview people about their spiritual lives and how they support others in lifting their spirits. I'm Reverend Joel Grossman, Interfaith Minister, Director of Spiritual Services with Constellation Hospice, and I also offer spiritual counseling on a donation basis virtually.
And I'm Ted Jones, a meditation teacher at North Shore Insight Meditation Center.
Our show is based on the following four assumptions. Number one, everybody is spiritual. Sometimes we are conscious and active regarding our spirituality, sometimes not, but we are always spiritual.
Second, that there are many ways to lift your spirit, not only through religious practices, but also through nature, art, relationships, service to others. Might throw in body work as well for today's show.
Three, each person's spiritual life is unique and may change in small or large ways over time.
It's important to respect your own spiritual journey, trusting that one step leads to another, and also to respect the uniqueness of everyone's particular spiritual journey, regardless of how different it may be from your own. We're not here to convince you of any particular approach or method, but rather just to offer food for thought. We're very pleased today to have as our guest Melissa Belliard, who is the owner of Harmony Integrative Bodywork in Haverhill, Massachusetts. She has had her own bodywork practice and delighted in giving massage and energy work for over 16 years. She feels the flow and connection to divine feminine, particularly in her work, especially during myofascial release and reiki energy work. She has been learning about ancestral trauma and has seen it arise in herself and clients, and it works to transmute it and release it. Melissa worked with Deborah Fay D'Onofrio to create a divine feminine podcast called Wild Magic Harmony, where they explored aspects of the divine and then focused on using intuition. Melissa knows that connecting to intuition is part of connecting to the divine. She has been practicing yoga and meditation for over 20 years and is a 300-hour YTT certified yoga teacher. She teaches chair yoga in the community and values breath work and grounding as important to supporting yoga. In her previous life, she was an environmental scientist, spent 16 years in human resources, and more recently helped others as a professional residential organizer. When not helping others, she's figuring out how to parent her two grown kids, spending a lot of time in nature with her partner, dancing, listening to music. Melissa, it's wonderful to have you here. We'd like to start, as we do with all our guests, by just getting a sense of your own spiritual history, kind of right back from the beginning of whatever practices you were introduced with as a child and how that evolved over time for you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ted and Joel, for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I was raised Catholic by my father predominantly. My mother was not particularly religious. So he was the one that would bring us to church and CCD. And I used to laugh because he would fight with mostly my sister on the way to church and on home. And I was always like, how is this Christian? I don't know. But But we had children's mass with music, and honestly, that was like such a joy to me because I love music. And like you were saying in the introduction, that I feel like we can find divine everywhere. And to me, music is one of those holy places for me. So it was really a joy to be able to participate that. And I definitely looked forward to going to church every week because of the singing aspect. I also love the ritual of Mass. Even now, I've gone to a couple services where my body reflexively kicks into kneeling and standing and saying the words. So I know that was an important part of my upbringing, but then as I got older, I just started noticing that as I became more aware of the outside world, especially as a teenager and young adult, that there were a lot of mismatches between what I was hearing in the church and what their beliefs were. So I eventually, kind of lost the joy that I had of going to church. And definitely by college, I wasn't participating in Mass any longer. And I really started opening myself up to other types of religion or spirituality. In particular, I was starting to become more interested in earth-based religion. I just felt like nature being another place where I really connect with the divine. I just feel so authentic and beautiful and connected when I'm in nature. So I felt like that was an interesting connection of divine to nature-based religion. But I was too afraid and too guilty as a Catholic to actually explore that openly until probably my early 30s, when I did a 13-month Divine Feminine tele class with Deborah Roth in New York City. She's a longtime interfaith minister and practitioner of ritual. So I really got a lot out of learning about like different aspects of goddess and divine feminine. And that's where I really felt the connection. And I felt like that was something I resonated with strongly. So since then, that was in my early 30s and I'm 53 now, I just have been expanding and opening and continuing to practice going out in nature and just being connected there, finding my connection in music. As you mentioned, I was in corporate and it was hard to connect with divine there, but I was starting to listen to my intuition more. I predominantly work with scientists, so it was actually very challenging to use my intuition because they wanted data and facts. If I said I was in recruiting and if I would say, well, I feel like this candidate's not a great match, they'd want to know, well, give me the facts and give me the data. And I was like, I can't give you that. All I can tell you is my gut is telling me this person is not going to be a good cultural fit for us. So that was a struggle for a while until they started to see that I was actually correct in many cases. So it almost pushed me harder to start listening to my intuition, because in the face of not having the facts, I knew, again, by having my experience validated by people not being a great fit, that I did have solid information that I couldn't necessarily back up. So, and then I've been doing yoga for a long time, but I finally got certified right before the pandemic. And so I feel like that's been another beautiful aspect of sharing that connection to consciousness, to us being all part of the one. And I have to say, my most important message is very simple. And I just feel like we're all here on this planet to love each other and to try and achieve love in every way possible, including loving ourselves, which honestly is probably one of the hardest people to love sometimes. So.
Absolutely. I want to backtrack a little bit to just drill down a little bit in the earth-based spiritual practices that you were involved in, what that was like, and then also, how's that morphed into the divine feminine and kind of how that manifests itself in your life, the contact with the divine feminine. So if you could just kind of elucidate on those two.
Yeah, thank you. So I've read about pagan because it is an earth-based religion, but honestly, I don't feel the connection so strongly with like doing spells or other things that are traditionally associated with being more Wiccan. But the earth-based aspect of it. So I have an altar that I meditate at. I have all the elements present on the altar. I actually have a little altar set up next to me right now before we started this call. So I feel like I'm really connecting to the elements, which are earth, fire, water, and air, and the different aspects that they can have in how I connect with myself, how I connect. I love following the moon cycles.
Me
And the
too.
divine feminine. Go ahead.
No, I just saying I follow the moon cycles very carefully myself. I had the opportunity to camp out in the woods of Nova Scotia for a couple of summers by myself, and that the moon is such a huge factor when you're out alone in the woods, because it brings the light, and then it goes, and that really imbued that lunar cycle in me very very strongly.
I love that. That sounds beautiful. And I do like, to me, the lunar cycles represent life, where we have these periods of growth and expansion, and everything is very obvious and lit up for us. And then those periods where we have to go inward and go a little darker, which that's another thing that I've discovered is called, I guess, spiritual bypassing is the current name for it. But just knowing that this lovely, peace, love, and joy is not how we always are as humans. So just really embracing that darker aspect of ourselves. And I feel like the moon cycles help us to go inward. And then we can look at the seasonal cycle, right? So now we're coming into the dark time of year, where it is very natural to start going inward, to start wanting to hibernate more. We really, even though the holidays often encourage us to be more social, nature wants us to come inside and be still and be quiet and go deep during this time of year. So I feel like there's a push and a pull, a yin and a yang with that in our society of, this is really not what nature wants us to be doing right now. She really wants us to be like chilling out and, just refreshing ourselves and getting our energy restored from the expansive energy of spring and growth of summer. So yeah, I feel like, and as I'm talking more, obviously connecting with those seasonal changes as well, I do kind of observe the pagan calendar, where you have the wheel of the year, and that it just acknowledges mostly the external cycles of like planting seeds, the harvest, growth, that sort of thing. So I would say that at least observe that, but I don't follow a very, scripted version of paganism. So does that answer kind of
Yes,
the earth?
that's very helpful. That's very helpful. Sounds very grounding.
Yes. Yes. And I feel like I am a very grounded person, but it's important for me because I do feel that's a gift I give to my clients and my yogis, that I help them come and be connected and be in their bodies. Again, society is not something that encourages us to be present in our bodies. It's all about being up here in the intellect. So the more that we can come into our bodies and really start being present with what is going on, many times our bodies have messages for us. And unfortunately, a lot of people wait until it elevates to the level of massive discomfort or pain to actually start listening to the body. But the body will give you the messages if you're not listening. So
So could you say a little bit more about how the divine feminine and the Wiccan information enters the body work that you do?
I would say most of that work is probably just quiet and internal for me. When clients are on the table, I do welcome in any, I call them spirits and guides, who are there for that person's upliftment and growth, always for the highest good. So I'm doing that personal invocation. I will do it verbally if they're open to it. So I do have some clients who are more open, or they have a very clear spiritual practice. But mostly I would say a lot of that work is my own internal work, and really calling into my divine feminine. As Ted said in the introduction, I feel like when I connect with my intuition, that quiet, still, deep voice that's not fearful, it comes from a place of love and expansiveness. I feel like that's where I make beautiful connections with what's going on with the client's body on the table. And I've gotten to trust my messages more, which I didn't always understand in the beginning of my work. And it's really hard to find mentors who practice in this way to actually get support from them. Ted and I have talked a lot about myofascial, and there are some practitioners who don't believe that there is intuition involved, whereas I believe that it is deeply involved with what I do. And the more I trust and listen to it, even if it's maybe giving me messages that seem a little wacky, which I will share with the client if they're open to it, there 9 times out of 10, the person resonates with what I'm saying. So I just have to stop. I call it getting engaged with my ego versus getting engaged with my intuition. The more I can step out of the ego. And that's what John Barnes recommends, the myofascial practitioner. Get out of the ego mind and get into the intuitive body mind. And that's where you're going to get the gifts, the release, the healing that can happen on the table.
Yeah. And that's where Reiki is based, isn't it?
Yep, I call it
Intuition.
universal love. When I try to explain to people, like, it's universal love. That's the best way I have to explain it. And again, it's not me doing the work. It's me making contact with the client. The client's body is doing the work. The client's energy is the one that's moving through them. And I just consider myself like a vessel or a channel, and a person who can hold space for that without judgment, without storytelling, with lots of compassion. I find, again, that's a gift I can bring to my clients, that I'm not judgmental. And if whatever your experience is the right one you should be having.
I'd like to get into kind of the sort of nuts and bolts of the different services that you do, but I'd like to place it within a particular context, and that is the book, The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, that was written about, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, but it has continued to be a bestseller and has been on the New York Times bestseller list for well over 150 weeks. And the point of the book, and why it's attracted so much attention, and deservedly so, is that trauma of all kinds is stored in the body, and that he talks about how in order to heal trauma, you really have to heal the body. And that this is in some ways a kind of resurrection of a lot of things that were happening back in the 1970s, where, you know, it was Rolfing, bioenergetics, Alexander technique, all of these things. And that then there was this kind of, I don't know, period where that stuff just wasn't, those techniques weren't that popular anymore. And that now there is a great resurgence in the recognition of the importance in the body, not only for healing trauma, but also for helping people move on their spiritual journey. I mean, you touched on the notion of the spiritual bypass. That's when you try to be spiritual without really dealing with your psychological and emotional stuff. So I think a lot of people are seeing that's that sort of essential message that Bessel van der Kolk put out there is really important. So I'd like to get a sense from you about kind of how you see your work in a general way, and then the different components, because, you know, your name of your business is Integrative Bodywork, because you use a lot of different things, and getting a sense of how that all fits together for you, I think would be very helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, it's such a big topic. And so I love that work to, like you said, bring out those ideas that we can have talk therapy. Talk therapy is great, but it only goes so far if you have that trauma in the body, which for most of us is imprinted at a very early age, when we may even be pre-verbal. So I feel like a lot of what I see come up on the table are events that happened in a person's life that they weren't able to process the trauma at the time it was happening. Again, I keep going, I'm on my little soapbox about our society, but I feel like we're made to be like, just, brush it off, get up. If you get hurt, just, suck it up and get up and move on. And that doesn't allow us to process that trauma that happened to us. And I know Peter Levine's work is very crucial to what John Barnes has learned about the body as well. He also talks about the somatic. I think there's a branch called somatic experiencing therapy now that came out of his work.
There is, and
it's all.
Kind of a little bit of background of who John Barnes is, because not everybody knows about him, unfortunately, including Bessel van der Kolk, apparently, because he didn't appear in the book, although I think that Barnes' contribution to all this is absolutely massive, and just full disclosure that I'm a myofascial John Barnes patient or client of Melissa, and that we've worked on this for a number of years. But maybe just fill us in on who John Barnes is.
Sure. So John Barnes he came from a PT background. He actually studied with Upledger, John Upledger, I forget what Upledger's first name is, but the craniosacral person that created craniosacral work. So they both studied under the same teacher and then went off onto their own. So John Barnes really started discovering what's now known as the fascia. And at the time he was trying to educate people about it, everyone thought fascia was this dried out white tissue that they moved out of the way in cadavers so they could study the muscles. So as a massage therapist, we learned muscle, muscle, muscle. We really didn't talk about the fascia. What the fascia does is it actually, oh, you're muted, sorry. It covers the entire body. Did you want to say something?
Yes, just a good description, and you're
okay,
doing
great.
Right
Yeah.
now.
So the fascia is a connective tissue that covers our entire body. It's considered a huge big web. It covers our bones, our muscles, our cells. So it's imprinted in our entire body. If you took all the muscle and all the other tissue out of the body and kept the fascia, you would recognize that it was Melissa, that my fascia looks just like me. So what they've discovered, especially recently, is how much information the fascia holds, first of all, of old traumas, how it can get bound down in ways that don't show up on x-rays or scans. So someone could be having this massive pain and everything looks fine on an x-ray or an MRI, but yet there's, they can't turn their neck all the way, or they can't get rid of this pain that's just chronic. And a lot of times we discover it's actually in the fascia that's the problem. So John Barnes really had to go against a lot of differing thought at the time until it finally was discovered that he was actually correct this whole time. So his work really gets into how do we soften the fascia. It takes 3 to 5 minutes, so you're not rushing through. It's not like a massage where you're like, rubbing the muscle hard to get it to work. You're going very softly and gently. You're making connection at the collagenous barrier, which is right below the skin. So it's just very different work. So John Barnes really had to, again, just keep doing what he knew was working. And then he eventually is finally being recognized for that work. So, and then the aspect that you and I have talked more about is the unwinding piece, which is releasing that old held trauma, and that you don't need to know what the trauma came from, but your body knows how to release it. So people could be doing things like shaking on the table. They could be crying. They could be just moving in these beautiful unspiraling patterns. It's actually very gorgeous and humbling to watch someone unwind, because you can see that their body is just doing its thing and not worrying about what the mind is saying. So a person really has to get out of their own way, which can be really hard with our ego-based society of coming again out of that and into our intuition, letting the body drive the release. And afterwards, and my own unwindings, I've just felt so much lighter, more peaceful, and more connected to love every time I unwind. So I highly recommend it. It's not easy to get to for some people, but it is an important part of John's practice that, again, it's not science-based, so it's hard for him to prove that it works and it's real, but we've seen this over and over again throughout so many clients. So does that help?
Yeah,
Yes.
and what's the myo part?
Myo does mean muscle, so your muscles are still involved. And like Ted said, I do integrative work, so I will sometimes work the soft tissue. John, there are places to do soft tissue work on the muscles, but the majority of his focus is more on the fascia. But sometimes someone just needs a good massage or a good neck rub. I mean, when it comes down to it. So that's where I really have to trust my intuition. And, I try to communicate with the clients, because I have to re-educate people if they're not familiar with myofascial, because they might get on the table and be like, oh, she's going to work me head to toe. And I may spend most of the time working on a certain part of your back or your feet, even though you're having a neck problem, because it's all connected. So yeah, so I don't know, was I talking
Yes.
about something else? Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. Let's talk about chakras as well, because that's, that there are different, oh, I don't know, maybe there's just one kind of energy, but it's understood in different ways. And that's really what you do, is try to be guided by intuition about what's helpful for one person at particular time. And how about chakras and that flow of energy, the yoga related uh, flow of energy, or how it's understood in that way?
Sure. And that's another whole complex study. But basically, chakras are energy wheels in the body. They've been studied in yoga for a very long time. I personally, in my own observations, I also feel it's very connected to the Chinese meridians used in acupuncture. Um, there's a practice called polarity balancing that also connects with that. So I feel like you're saying, it's all the same energy. It's just called different things, and it's mapped out maybe a little differently, modality to modality. But basically, there are 7 main energy wheels in the body, starting at the base of the spine and moving all the way up the spine to the top of the head. There's actually hundreds of them. They're outside our bodies, more in our auric fields. We have them on the edge of each of our fingers and toes. But the 7 main ones each have a quality associated with them. And so you actually follow, if you know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the triangle of, we start at the bottom with our baseline is we just need to get our basic needs met of food and shelter and survival. And then we can move our way up into these higher, more, intellectual or ethereal principles. So the root chakra, excuse me, is about safety and security, developed very young when we're first born, even before we're born. And then as we make our way up the body, each chakra is developed as we get older and older, with the top being the crown chakra, which is our connection to the divine, or universal consciousness, whatever you call it. Again, I feel like we're all talking about the same thing. It's just called different things in different religions, right? So so I try to tune in if a client is interested in me doing a scan of their chakras and balancing. I can just kind of report what I'm feeling as I move up through their body. A lot of time I'll either feel stagnation, where there won't be a lot of energy moving under my hands, or it'll be very prickly, like there's overactivation of that energy, or there's just a nice, sweet, balanced energy that I'm feeling coming out of it. So I can give that information to the client just to give them feedback. So let's say your sacral chakra, which is right below your navel, that has to do with creativity. So I may say, if I'm feeling like it's a little quiet, I may say, well, what have you been doing for creative pursuits? And it doesn't have to be art or music. It can be as simple as like working in your garden or making a nice meal. So these are just different ways of getting information about the client, where again, we get that thinking mind out of the way and just really tune into what the body is telling us. So that's probably the simplest explanation I can give of chakras. You are also familiar, so I don't know if you want to add anything, or Joel, if you're informed in any way in that area.
Yeah, well, I had a Hindu practice for 5 years, and the work was all about moving the energy up to the higher chakras, both through the diet that we practice and meditation and kirtan and various means. So I have some familiarity with the chakra system. And if you'd like to hear it in your words, each of the chakras and what they're associated with energetically.
Okay, so yeah, the root chakra is at the base of our spine. There are colors associated with it. I always tell someone, if you see a different color, that's the color that's the right color for you. But generally, the root chakra is red, has to do with safety and security and stability. So if we're feeling anxious or fearful, you may need some grounding in your root chakra. And there are also yoga poses for each of these to help strengthen them or activate them if you are feeling low. I know I've resourced this to TED before. There's a beautiful book by Anna Dea Judith, The Sevenfold Journey. And she talks all about chakras and what to do, and journaling and movement, breath work. So that it's a beautiful resource if you want to dive deeper into the chakras. The sacral chakra right below the belly button has to do with our creativity, our senses. So using all of our senses in the body. It is also tied to sexuality, but I feel like that gets too much focus sometimes. It's also about birthing. So what are we birthing out into the world, whether it's a physical person, or is it a project or a book or whatever. The solar plexus chakra is about navel level, also connected to Dantian in Qigong, a power center, right? So and we call it fire in the belly. Oh, sorry. So the sacral chakra, the color is orange. For solar, it's yellow, sunshine, fire in the belly, that sort of thing. And this has to do with our courage, our determination, our willpower. This is often an area where as kids, we might have been asked to shut that part of us down because we were very willful. So this could be an area where that kind of energy could get stuck for you if you were discouraged from expressing your determination and courage and will. Next, we come to heart, which again, a lot of people associate with love, which that is part of it. It is love for others, but like I said, love for ourselves to me is the most important part of the heart chakra. It's also about connection, and the color is green. We come up to throat, which you can see mine is very lit up because I'm talking and expressing my voice. So it's about expressing your truth and your authenticity. The color is usually blue. And again, this has to do with speaking your truth, which in our society, not always welcome, especially as females. So that's an area where I try to encourage my clients to really express themselves if they feel like that's been shut down for them. Next, we come to third eye. The color is violet, and this has to do with intuition and wisdom. It's also centered right over the pineal gland in the brain. So I feel like there is a very physiological connection as well to the third eye. And then, like I said, the crown is our consciousness, our connection to the divine. The Hara line, if you're familiar with those, that goes from the head all the way up to heavens, comes from the crown chakra. So really what we're trying to do like you said, Joel, is we're trying to open up this energy, move it up the chain. And for a lot of us, we're already very much in our upper body. So for some of us, we really actually need to bring the energy also downwards into the base to really come down and be rooted in our lower chakras so that our higher chakras are supported and not just flying off into outer space. So yeah, I feel like that's how I would describe each one, but you guys are welcome to add based on your own knowledge.
Right on with my experience. Well,
I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about your experience, Joel. 5 years of practice. I mean, it's how did it end? You're no longer.
Well, growing up Jewish, it was a little hard for me to give myself over to the guru. Everything else about it, I really loved and took a lot from, but that one piece kind of got in the way for me. So,
okay.
Yeah, it was a great experience. It was Ananda Marga, and the guru was Ananda Murti, which was not only spiritual, but it was very socio-political also. So covered a lot of fronts.
Go ahead.
I'd like to hear, Melissa, about working with men in relation to divine feminine.
Beautiful. And so, yeah, I guess I should clarify when I say divine feminine, I don't mean a gender. So we have our yin and our yang, our masculine and our feminine. Our bodies are actually split up energetically. So our left side is generally our feminine side. So this side has to do with the yin aspects of receptivity, coolness, the darkness, nourishment, where we're taking in nourishment, where we're taking in maybe our divine practice. And then our masculine side is on the right, and that's what we're putting out into the world. So this is our yang, much more goal-oriented or project-oriented, much more assertive. And again, we all have this even if we're presenting as male or female biologically. So we all have these two aspects, and it's a matter of how do we balance those in our life. So I feel like for me, when I'm using the word divine feminine, I'm really talking about that beautiful connection inward and deep, and intuition and wisdom, all the places that maybe can't be seen externally. But I do feel that men certainly have that aspect, and I've seen some very beautiful divine feminine men expressing that in a very lovely way in our society. I do feel like there needs to be a return to the divine male, the divine masculine, where we're coming from that place of, yes, we can be assertive. I can be a Kali type goddess where I'm being fierce and, trying to get stuff done, but I can do it in a way that's not harmful. So for me, that's how I would describe divine masculine, is this very maybe protective, getting stuff done, making sure things are taken care of, but doing it in a way that's not toxic or egotistical or from a need of wanting to be in charge or in control. So that's, I think, how I would distinguish the two. But I do, like I said, feel like we all have very beautiful presentations of both of these aspects inside of us. And, you know, I would invite most people, everyone really, to look at where do you find you might have some imbalance. And if I'm working on you on the table, I may say, you know, for me, a lot of my stuff comes on the left side. This is also our mother line. Our right side, I'm sure I'm doing the opposite on the camera, but our right side is our father line. So looking at those ancestral lines, which we had referenced earlier, maybe you have ancestral trauma that's coming forward in that side of your body, because there are people who I definitely meet, and myself included, like everything's on my left side. So it's just, you know, invites me to look and say, well, let's get curious about why that is. Can, you know, we start talking about these things and what is resonating. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit more about ancestral trauma, because you did, we mentioned it in your bio and just now. It sounded in your bio like it's something that is an ongoing exploration for you. And I guess maybe begin with what are you finding out? And how did that start? And what are you finding out? And how is that impacting your practice?
Yeah, when I was younger, I've read about it certainly over the years, but I just was like, come on, that stuff can't be passed down. You know, it's my mother passing down to me, it's my father passing down to me. But as obviously the discovery with epigenetics and all these other beautiful, more scientific based things, that yes, we are carrying these imprints. However that's being carried, I don't understand, but am now becoming very in touch with it in myself. I'm seeing it in my clients. I'm hearing people talk about it on the table. And I just totally am loving this aspect of, I feel like this generation of beings on the planet are finally ready and strong enough and open enough to actually take on. This is a very big task to take on, right? We're here, we're taking care of our own stuff, and now we have to take care of everything that came behind us. Like, what the heck? So I feel like we are actually at that place where this is a gift, and to me, it's a privilege and an honor to be able to try and clear some of that trauma from my own history, for my children, for their children, for the future of people on this planet, who really just, so many of us have come from oppression and being made to leave the place where we were born. We've been asked to leave behind, you know, our stuff and our culture. Some of us have been made to leave behind our language, or the way that we dress or carry our, you know, what we wear externally. And I'm seeing this imprint on the table. And the big question I ask is, I say to myself, or I say to the client, is this mine? So I'm feeling something on the table. It's very strong. I can ask myself, is this mine? And yes, sometimes it is. Sometimes it's something that happened to me directly. But sometimes I'm like, no, this is not me, but it's something I can feel in my body. And that's where I feel where that ancestral stuff is coming. And yes, there's trauma, but I'm also trying to look at what are the gifts that my ancestors gave me. I feel like this intuitive connection I have had to have come from somewhere in my line. I would not be surprised if I were related to witches in the Celtic period. I just found out I'm like 54% Irish. I'm just feeling this very strong connection that kind of just validates that I've always had this connection to like Celtic, and they're actually kind of the source of some of the pagan religions. So anyway, that's where I'm finding this connection, and people on the table also moving through this very heavy, very serious, again, isn't it enough that we have to deal with our own stuff on the planet? Now we're trying to deal with stuff that came before us. But in doing so, we then lighten our burden. We lighten the burden of our kids and people around us. So I feel we're doing a great service to the planet and beings by doing this work, but it can be a lot.
And my understanding of the stuff that comes from generations before is it really helps us to not take it on as a problem, a fault in myself, but something I just need to deal with that came before me. Pia Melody, who does a lot of work with adult children of alcoholics, came up with a whole idea of carried over feelings. So the feelings that your mother or father, maybe it was your grandparents, we continue on with. And when we can stop and say, this isn't mine, came from before, it's a lot easier to work with it.
Yeah, Ted, I don't know if there's anything you want to add, because I know that you've been interested in this as well.
Well, I think that one of the things is uh, Cynthia Bourgeot is someone who's written fairly extensively on the kind of permeability of the barrier between people who are alive and ancestors and other people from their past, and that it, in her scheme, it's definitely a two-way street where we have the opportunity to uh, actually contribute to the healing of people who may have not finished something in their time on the earth, and that also that we can get guidance and help from people who have passed to the other side, died, and moved into another realm of being. So and in my own experience, sometimes it feels like, oh, this is pretty obvious. And, other times it feels like, what's going on? And that, I think that what you're talking about, throughout this, about the importance of intuition in guiding us as we go through these explorations, so important.
Yeah, and I also want to say that we don't have to do it alone. I think that's another really important message. I think a lot of people feel, certainly with our screen age we're in, it's a lot of people just feel very isolated. I'm an introvert, so for me, like, COVID was actually kind of joyful, because I was just like, great, I don't have to talk to anybody. This is awesome. But that only goes so far. We're social beings, right? That's what humans are. So, but I just, to find someone that you can, even if, like you said, it's someone that's passed on, like, isn't it a joy to know that we don't have to do this alone, that we're not recreating the wheel here, that there are resources and people and modalities that can help support us in whatever way we're showing up to. How much we want to take on or don't want to take on is our choice, of course, but just to not, try not to do it alone, because you're not the only one going through this experience. And that's what I've discovered in my own travels, my own journey, that I was not the only one who had, a lot of issues that I went through in my childhood. There are plenty of other people who've had it. There are plenty of people who are trying to heal it like I am. And so it's just a beautiful message of, try and get the support you need.
So, is there anything else that you'd like to cover, Melissa? I mean, some of the, other integrative things, because I've seen some of the stuff you send out, uh, things like scents, sounds, uh, chair yoga. Would like you to just say a little bit about that, because that may be a new concept to many of the people watching this. Um, just kind of anything else you want to add in terms of what you do in terms of the complementary um, uh, the things that you bring to your work.
Yeah, thank you. So I started doing yoga in around 2000, and through my own journey through that, I would cry in Shavasana, which is the last pose you do after you've done all the physical work. Then you come down and just lay on the floor and you release everything. I would often find I would be crying during Shavasana. I'm like, what is going on? I just had this beautiful practice. I love my body. I'm very kinesthetic. And so after a while, I discovered I was releasing stuff that I was holding and carrying. So that became its own gift in discovering that by moving my body, by breathing and being very present, I could then access a way to release this stuff that I don't need to carry inside of me. So that is something that I try to, it's hard when you're working with a more secular, secular is the right word, but more, population who's maybe not as in touch with the other aspects of yoga. They think it's just this physical practice. There's so much more to it, and there's so much that you can get from it by accessing breath work. Especially, I really try to get my clients to breathe. That's actually one of the first messages I was getting my own body. When people be on the table, I would start breathing much more fully. And I, after a while, discovered I was doing it because the client was probably needing to do it. And often that cue would get them to start breathing more deeply. When we're feeling grief, we're not really breathing deeply. So to be able to get to grief, you really need to take those nice deep breaths. So those are tools I try to use on the table with a client to help them. Oftentimes when someone goes into a release, they might start breathing much more shallowly or start avoiding it because it's uncomfortable. By breathing, we can like welcome what's happening without trying to resist it. And oftentimes that can help us move through to what needs to come next to release. For chair yoga, I love that. I love my senior population. It's a way to get yoga. And a lot of people think, oh, it's just easy. It's chair yoga. I'm like, nope. It's pretty challenging. You're going to be breathing hard and you're probably going to be cursing me at certain points. But because I'm going to push you for what your body can do. But my joke is, as long as you're feeling a stretch, I'm happy. So it doesn't have to be done perfectly. So I try to take a lot of the pressure off that you have to look a certain way in warrior or whatever. So that's something I encourage people. If it's hard for you to get up and off the floor, or if you're someone who's just coming back into trying to be in better shape, chair yoga is a beautiful entryway back into being in your body in a way that's much easier to access than trying to get up and off the floor. So, and then the other thing I grew up as a musician. I love music. I love the way we all come into entrainment with it. I don't know if you've done drum circles, but especially there, it's just a beautiful way of you connect with everybody. The beat changes organically. It's not one person driving what's going on. It's this beautiful circular connection. I have crystal bowls and I just bought a gong. So there are aspects to sound. And I feel like a lot of people on the table need to be making noise. That's one thing I feel like our society really shuts us down, is making noise, like keening or crying or yelling. So this is something I'm really trying to get my clients to do more on the table, to come out of their comfort zone, because sound can certainly, as you've discovered with like kirtan, Joel, I love kirtan for that. It can release so much that is inside of us, and that vibrational energy I feel like it breaks up what's going on in a way that other things cannot access. So I want to keep doing more with sound. I haven't really figured out how I'm going to do that yet, maybe sound baths or something in the future, but I want to encourage my clients to make noise on the table where it's comfortable for them. So
Beautiful. Yeah. So we're nearing the end of our time, and we always ask at the end what you would encourage people to help them on their spiritual journey. You've certainly, throughout the interview, have said a lot about that, but anything you'd like to add, your encouragement, advice?
yeah, and I think you guys do a great job too of, it's not just going to church and kneeling on a pew and saying prayer. Like that's a great, if that works for you, that's beautiful. But there's so many ways for us to be spiritual. I feel like when we're doing the work we were put on this planet to do, that we're connecting with spirit in that moment. For me, music, art, being out in nature, being with my grandkids. I just encourage people to really figure out what that is for you. Where do you feel the most connected? Where do you feel most at ease? Where do you feel most in love? And keep doing those things.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's really been a pleasure to have you here, Melissa. Let me just let people know or maybe you can, your web address for your business so that they can get in touch with you if they want to.
Sure. And then also, I think it'll be in the show notes, but the name of the podcast, if you wanted to check that out,
Yes.
I had such a blast with Deborah Fay. The podcast is called Wild Magic Harmony, and you can access it wherever you access your podcasts. And then my website is Harmony Integrative Bodywork. So Harmony coming from my maiden name, Harmon. My grandparents had a music shop, which I didn't even know about till I was getting ready to open up. And that was just a beautiful sign from the universe that I was doing the right thing. And I love music. So Harmony Integrative, like you said, I'm integrating what's going on. And I just call it body work. It's not just massage, it's working the entire body. So, yep. And I'm in downtown Haverhill, so come check me out. I'd love to meet you.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much. It's
Yeah,
been a
thank you,
pleasure.
Melissa. Really
Thank you.
informative. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you. I'm so glad you're creating this community. I love what you're doing. So yeah, keep up the great work. You're expressing your own spirituality this way. So thank you.
Yeah. So thank you very much for watching or listening. Either at 11:30 on the third Wednesday of the month on Channel 8 in the Newburyport community, or the YouTube and SoundCloud links that you can find out about through Newburyport Media Hub. And look forward to being back together again next month. So thank you all.
Till then, everyone.